the show. And I think I even introduced this episode as though we were going to do a Q&A, as me and Mike spoke about. We were going to cover some questions, and these were very old questions, so I don't feel particularly attached to them. We ended up going on one of our typical kind of long chats surrounding various subjects, one of those being Mike's recent competition prep, where he competed in the NPC Masters Nationals. He came 5th. Not what he was after, and it didn't go exactly how he wanted. He didn't look how he wanted to look. So we dug into why that maybe was the case, his hypothesis for what caused such a physique, and what he's going to do in future to rectify that and bring about a better physique in future. And then we dived into kind of unsolicited feedback, or feedback generally, how to take that as someone who is getting it and receiving it, how you can actually take it and learn from it. But also when you are giving other people feedback, maybe the issues with you doing that, how you might not look the best from doing so. And I think there was just a lot of take homes for anyone who is a coach or competitor from the bodybuilding perspective, and even just dieting and learning about various aspects of how you look, body water dynamics, stress, that sort of thing. And then how to kind of use and behave on social media to some extent. I think, as always, lots of take homes from Mike, and it was a really enjoyable discussion. And as always, guys, as you know, hopefully by now, at Revive Stronger, we are online coaches. We help people gain muscle, lose fat, help them with their technique, get that dialed in, with their diet as well, making sure that's in the best place possible to get the best outcomes they can under their circumstances. And we take an individualized approach and have our weekly check-ins where we get to talk and touch base. So as a reminder, we coach, and that's what we do, and we're really good at it. So if you're interested in that service, definitely check it out. It's always linked in the description box below. And before we get stuck into things, let's just get a word from the sponsor from this podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by Caldera Lab. They are a skincare product, and we know how important first impressions are. If you look like you don't take care of yourself, your skin included, that's not going to rub off well. And you can give your best self and best first impression via using the skincare product that is Caldera Lab. As I move into my 30s and beyond, my age is becoming something that I'm more and more aware of, and so I am wanting to try and delay that process. And so I've been using the base along with the clean slate and the good and the icon for the last few months now, and I can definitely say it's kind of increased my confidence about that process and how I'm helping myself slow things down. These are clinically proven to help with wrinkles, to help with the fine lines around the eyes, and to slow the aging process. So I think they're definitely worthwhile for if you are someone who is concerned about things, and like I said, giving your best first self-impression, and these are good products to be using for that. And so we have an exclusive code and offer for you guys. If you want to get a nice 20% off, you can use the code REVIVE. That's going to be linked in the description box, and you can get 20% off Caldera Lab products right now. So without further ado though, let's get into the podcast with Mike Israetel. Hi guys, welcome back to the Revive Stronger podcast. I'm your host, as always, Steve Hall, and today I have Mike Israetel back on the show. We're going to be doing some Q&A that I have left from quite a long time ago, because typically when I end up talking to Mike, we end up just going down little rabbit holes, which I think everyone appreciates. I certainly appreciate. And Mike's back on, I think now 5 days post-show, are we, Mike?
Yeah, 6, I guess. Yeah.
6 days. Okay. So you recently competed in Masters Nationals, and you did better than you thought you were initially going to do, I think. I think you thought you weren't going to get a top 5, but you ended up getting that placing, right?
My prediction was 5th through 7th, and I got 5th.
Okay. So pretty spot on.
Yeah, the optimistic side of my prediction.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess no one goes into a competition hoping to place or to like get a 5th or a 7th, but so you're kind of hoping obviously to do better than that. But how do you feel about it now? I know at the time you were feeling like anyone would, a little bit kind of gutted, or I don't know if disappointed is the right word, but like, how are you feeling now?
Great English line that we never use in the United States. If you tell someone you feel gutted in the United States, they're going to be like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. It's not anything apparent. How I did feel and how I do feel is slightly different. I mean, immediately, in the several weeks leading up to the show, my physique wasn't doing what I had hoped it would. And especially once the water drop had concluded, um, I realized that, like, oh, fuck, a lot more had better change if I'm going to be doing as well as I'd like. And in addition to that, the transformations with the peaking process that occurred in the few days before and leading up to the show, also not enough impressive things happened. So it was the day before the show, and I was like, okay, this is questionable, and I'm not prepared to win. And then as my body changed in the hours before I stepped on stage, as I got, my glaze on backstage, I told Jared, I was like, the fuck are we here for, man? I look like shit. And he's like, yeah, no, yeah, that sucks, basically. And we, of course, instantly started talking about what had gone wrong. And hilariously, almost exactly the same thing as Best Hypothesis currently had gone wrong with Jared in his last prep.
Sure,
several series of preps, almost down to the very same kind of constellation of, you call them symptoms or outcomes. And I can speak about those in just a minute, what those were. And then sort of like in the pumping up area, in prejudging, I knew that I wasn't looking great. I didn't know how bad it was going to be, because you never know how you look under the lights, and you never know how anyone else looks. The other guys in the class, I wasn't blown away at all by how they looked. And so I was like, who knows? Once prejudging had concluded, and I was in the second call out on prejudging, I was like, yeah, okay, everything makes sense. I look like shit, and I was judged like accurately. And then I moped for about 2 hours, and I considered verbally, explicitly told Nick and Jared, as why am I going to the night show at all? And they said, out of professionalism, you need to go. And they were completely correct. So I did. And that was a thing that happened. And then went to the night show, did my routine, my posing routine, which I didn't like. I didn't like doing it. I didn't like being there. I tried to be less mopey and a bit more cheery. And then I went backstage after the night show was over, and there was some pretty good lighting backstage. I took some pictures, which I posted one of them, and I'll post a few more over the next few months. It actually looked very good for that condition, and I was looking better and better sort of every hour. And especially my lines were starting to look really good. And I was like, oh, God damn it. So there was a mistiming element there for sure. But there was, I think, a general problem with the theoretical approach that Jared and I have been taking. And I think that's what caused most of the problems. Now, since then, I have been eating a slight surplus. I did one microcycle of training since the show, and my fatigue was so insanely high that I stopped training, and I'm now deloading. And actually, as per the recommendation of my wife, her and I came up with it together. It's her idea to just deload the rest of the week. And I was like, that is the smartest thing anyone's ever said. And so I'll be starting my mass rebound mesocycle actually probably on Monday or something like that. Today's Wednesday when we're filming this. Show was last Thursday, just for perspective. So that means that I trained Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, today's Wednesday is off, eating at a slight surplus, moderate surplus. I'm going to eat at maintenance, a little higher than maintenance for the rest of the week, do some deload training, and then Monday start again with the training. And so that's kind of how it is. Now I can speak to sort of what I think I did wrong. And
yeah, I'd be very interested
things. Yeah. So the thing I did was I was running off of a body fat estimate I had gotten from a DEXA, which I'll never do again, because the DEXA is not remotely reliable enough to be using for bodybuilding. And I had assumed I was a little bit leaner than I probably was, but that's also difficult. Maybe I was pretty close. So that was problem number one. So I would have been more comfortable, I think, dieting for a little bit longer, maybe 2 weeks longer at the very least. The other thing is that Jared and I did, I think, made the same mistake this time. And the fundamental mistake is a very interesting one. And I think it's one that would is interesting because I think it applies to both naturals and enhanced. And it especially applies to enhanced, maybe, or in a certain sense, especially to naturals, if you see it from another perspective. But here's the theoretical architecture behind this. What I'm increasingly becoming aware of is more true than I thought. This is a hypothesis, could be wrong. This is seemingly the standard view among prep coaches that are any good. This is Broderick's big thing that he says all the time. Him and I just had a consult yesterday where he beat me over the head with this another time. And here it is. So there is a range, let's call it, let's say you start at maintenance calories. Theoretically, we're just maintenance calories. And you're training hard and you're eating well and you're at maintenance calories. We already seem to know that the proper way to bulk is to go just 250 or 500 kcal on average above that ish, and just take a nice long time with it, or even take a short time, but then come back to maintenance or do a mini cut and then come back. But even if you do a short time of massing, you never really go much above like gaining a pound per week or something like that of tissue. And the alternative idea is that when you're in a fat loss diet, if you go way above that on a mass gain diet, it's 1,000, 1,500 calorie surplus, it leads to an incrementally really high fat gain and all these other problems with being able to move around and train hard and gas out and all this other stuff, health, blah, blah, blah. So it all goes down the drain. So really surpluses of much more than 250 kcal to 500 kcal per day are just a bad idea on almost all grounds. And they're worse and worse the bigger the surplus is above that. There are exceptions to this, but generally it's pretty much the case. The opposite seems to also be true, and this is something that I think Jared and I have underappreciated. So the opposite idea is that if you want to lose fat and retain muscle, it's probably not a good idea to go much below 500 calorie deficit. Maybe 750 on occasion, but not really. My average deficit size for this last fat loss phase was like 1,200 calories. And there were many days in a row, 4, 5, 6 days in a row, at which I cranked at a 1,700 calorie deficit. And I ended up creating such an unbelievable amount of diet fatigue that I was also taking much less gear than normal. So I was actually taking roughly 2/3 of the gear I would normally take. I put up quite a muscular physique in that regard, but definitely not my best and reflective of that. So what ended up happening was I summated such an unbelievable amount of fatigue trying to diet too quickly that it ended up resulting in a profound amount of muscle loss, some fat loss, but generally a very appearance. And Broads put it best to me in a conversation yesterday. He's like, look, on the margins, what you do in dieting for fat loss, for contest, especially with gear, is you raise the gear, typically 1.5 times as much gear pre-contest as off-season, which I wasn't doing. I was actually doing a little bit less pre-contest than I was off-season. And then you just dip very gently into a deficit and you end up just gaining muscle, losing fat at the same time until you look fucking unbelievable. And the reason you continue to look more and more or better and better is because your total fatigue is kept low. And Broad said that He's like, stress is the fucking killer of physiques. Like, it is toxic. It's fucking poison. And stress is the stimulus, or stress is the input. The result is fatigue, right? So you can't input fatigue onto someone, but you can input stress and you can reduce nutrients, and fatigue is the outcome measure. So it's the same, essentially the same, one step removed of saying fatigue is a killer, which is absolutely the case. So what you would want to do is maintain as low of a fatigue environment as possible, as allows you to still stay a little bit hypocaloric. What Jared and I had done, Jared dieted for 6 months straight, his 6-month prep, multiple shows in there. And at various points, Jared was also at a 1,500 calorie per day deficit. When Jared and I start dieting, typically on higher calories, lower expenditure, our physiques start to transform quickly. We look fucking really good. There's pictures of Jared at like 235 pounds where he is like big and fucking lean, like really starting to get there. And then we do the natty thing, quote unquote, and we just say, okay, like we're going to cut even more calories and get even leaner. And what ends up happening is the fatigue gets so high that we end up just having tons of body water issues, muscle loss, crazy energy loss, very poor fat loss. And Broads had a great way of putting it. He's like, look, if you do things on the margins and just a little bit of a calorie deficit, really watch the fatigue, you get an amazing physique. If you go much further than that, then you get like kind of like a Holocaust physique. Like, honestly, like you're starving and your body's like, dude, fuck this. Like, it's not going to keep your muscle on the bone. And if you say, okay, but I'll just take more gear, he's like, first of all, if you take enough gear, it will save you. But if you take a lot of gear and you crank the calories like crazy, you'll come in very lean at, let's say, 215 pounds. But if you take that same amount of gear and you eat up to the gear, you actually come in just as lean at 230. It's a little different than the natural world, but in the natural world, people solve this problem by dieting for longer because they still know excessive fatigue. As a natural excessive fatigue, you'll lose muscle real quick and you'll find that out real quick. With drugs, there's a bit of a delay and then you still lose the muscle, especially if you do the stupid double tap thing I did of really cranking the deficit and not taking enough gear. And then I just ended up looking very light. So I did lose the weight. Congratulations. It took me 4 days of eating at a slight surplus to get above 218 pounds of body weight, which I haven't seen in fucking forever. And so I lost plenty of muscle, and not just contractile tissue, but fullness. Like, so it's not a lot of it was contractile tissue. I'm already like, quite resized. I weigh 230 today and I have veins everywhere, clear abs, glute striations from the side. So I'm like, fuck me. So I just like completely burned myself to the ground. I remember a few months ago, I've had a fucking time machine. Jared couldn't quite get his glutes to show on stage. He was already excessively fatigued. We should have known. And he's like, what do I do? And I did the thing that most natty people think, which is the same thing people say in my comments, which is we just like diet harder for another 4 weeks. And that's what I told Jared to do. And we crushed him. I mean, he had like 150 grams of carbs per day for 4 weeks or something like that. This is an enormous individual, right? And it was basically 1,500 kcal surplus, a deficit for like weeks and weeks on end. And Jared basically just looked worse and worse and worse until he looked sick. His typical leg press is 6 plates for a set of 12. I watched him hack squat 4 plates for a set of 10 and like basically go to failure. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. He lost like a huge fraction of his strength. His body looked like total shit, flat and watery at the same time. We pulled a plug on his prep. This was a few weeks back. He started eating again. He took an active rest. He started getting back into training. Jared is now at a not very fat 255. He was at 215 to 220 when we got to his ass. His body just like soaked it all up. And now he's like fucking huge, getting to the strongest he's ever been that quickly. And Jared and I, we never want to be accused in our own heads by ourselves of not doing enough. So we push it harder. And I think this is something Broad said. I'll quote him. I don't think he cares about this. the secret to being a high level bodybuilder, other than genetics and drugs and showing up to the gym and eating your food, is also the ability to have just a chronic, very low stress levels. And one of the ways you do that is you just don't give much of a shit. I know a lot of bodybuilders that cheat on their diets all the time, but the result is they never drop their calories for weeks on end below maintenance for that much. And they end up, they drop their calories a bit, then they cheat a little bit, drop their calories, then they cheat, and it ends up being like, oh, actually you hit a 500 calorie deficit and your physique looks great. And so Jared and I thought, the way that we're going to get in shape is we're just going to out willpower everyone. And ta-da, we did it right into the fucking gutter. And it's so hilarious because I'm the guy that came up with the MRV concept. And like, hey, there's so much, such a thing as too much training. I don't do that anymore, thank fucking God. But I guess there's absolutely a dieting version of that, and total systemic stress. I know because I wrote half the fucking theory around this. But for some reason, I went at this very emotionally. And I was like, I'm just going to burn it to the ground. Because people will say like, if you want to get lean, you got to get flat. You can't stay full and be lean. I'm like, great. So I was flat for 2.5 months straight. No fill-ups, no refills, no nothing. I would go back to maintenance calories or what I thought was maintenance for 3 or 4 days, and almost nothing would happen. My body was just like, ugh. It's like someone came back from the Sahara Desert and they're like, here's a shot of water. They're like, yeah. Okay, back you go. So it ended up being that like we just pushed it way too fucking hard and for probably not long enough. So I think the next prep. So what I'm gonna do here is very likely in October and part of November, I'm gonna test run a mini cut, so to speak, but it is going to be at a very small deficit, probably around 500 calorie deficit. Crank up the gear, crank up the steps, and then train and eat. And hypothetically, I should look fucking really impressive come end of November, test a peak, trial a peak. That's a much more conservative. The peaks have been really, it takes a lot. I'm going to try to do it more conservatively because it's just the stress itself of the peak is what makes the peak fucked up. And we're going to try that and we're going to see how it goes. And that is kind of where the plan seems like it's at.
It makes so much sense to me when you put it that way, and so many things in part of that, like something I've said before is like good bodybuilders can push themselves really hard. Great bodybuilders can push themselves really hard and know when they should be pulling back. And that is something I would say you tick the box of that, at least in training. But in the nutritional side is something that obviously like that sometimes I can totally see the emotion can get into your head.
People may just, so there's, I'm Mr. YouTube celebrity now, bullshit, whatever. People get a snapshot of you as to what you say now. They don't understand where you've come from. And so just a bit of clarity for folks if they're interested. I had a few folks, some of them in a nice way, some of them in a, they would never fucking say this to my face, not nice way, Instagram comment type people, which, they're not real human beings, but let's pretend they are for a sec, would say, everyone has their own solution for what you need to get better. And it's really most people's solution is whatever it is they consider a pet peeve about you, they think that your resolution of that would be a thing. And so, for example, a few folks were like, you just got to like, fuck this RER shit. You just got to start training to failure and like fucking go at it hard. And so what these people don't know, and I don't blame them, how could they, is that for the first maybe 6 to 8 years of my training career, I did every set to concentric failure, multiple sets per session. Like I did Arthur Jones times 3. And I used to be a very stringent HIIT advocate, high intensity training, philosophically. And because I was like, obviously you want to work as hard as you possibly can in the gym. Why the fuck else would you do anything else? And there was a group of powerlifters that were training alongside us, and they were my friends at University of Michigan, and they switched to RIR training or RPE training. They switched to non-failure training. And I watched all of them get bigger and stronger than me over the course of a year. And I finally picked up stopping short of failure, and it revolutionized my training. And I never prescribed consistent training to failure ever again. By the way, something that again, I don't think he minds. Broderick Chavez just told me I had a conversation. It's something he's been thinking about recently, and I'd love to get him on a podcast to explain this. He says failure training is stupid on so many levels. It's especially the most stupid for people who are on gear. And I talked to him through it, and basically what it comes down to is the stimulus to fatigue ratio is just fucking dog shit. And on gear, you don't even need that much stimulus. So what the fuck are you doing, right? And there's all the other reasons why training to failure on gear particularly is a bad idea. The injury risk is much higher on gear if you push it to the max all the time. Like every now and again, it's totally great. So on training, it took me maybe 10 years to pry my mind away from burning Icarus style in the sun. And when I started training easier, I got way better. And with dieting, I think maybe I'm just coming around to that now. It took me another 10 years to not try to Icarus myself. My first prep that I ever did with Nick for our show we did in New York in 2013, Nick and I dieted for some total of 7 months straight for that contest. Towards the last last 2 months, most days of the week, I would only eat around 1,000 calories. This was weighing about 220. And it was just protein and veggies, multiple meals per day. And I'd completely shut my thyroid down. I was barely moving at all. My body water was fucking going completely insane. The fatigue was just outlandish. And I also decided it was a good idea to defend my dissertation the same week that I had the show. And I did. And I did well on my dissertation, did not do well on the show. And then I've done that sort of version of things for almost every other prep. And the preps I've taken it a little bit easier on, or the preps I've had that went the best, which is, of course, completely contrary to what your instincts would say. You got to push it. And the thing is, the people that I think say the most of you got to push it hard on the internet, they're people who it's relative to them what means pushing hard. And to them, it takes them a lot of pushing psychologically to get their bodies physiologically to push their limits. So to them, there's a psychological limiting factor. What they think is hard training to their bodies isn't that hard, but to their minds is. So they're right in saying you got to push it really hard, because for them, really hard means like they're now starting to get close to their MRV. For me, my ability to push mentally has never been a limiting factor. As a matter of fact, it's just fucking me in the ass the entire time. And so it's about time we took it a little bit easier, took it slower. Broderick's thing is what, longer, slower, or whatever for bigger duration, etc. And that seems to result in our best intermediate term physiques until we crank up the heat for no fucking reason whatsoever. And a lot of it's just like paranoia, panic, like, or OCD. Like, I want to have done everything possible. And the thing is, we also follow, I don't want to say the wrong people, but it's easy to get caught up with pros, posting motivational shit like, yeah, man, you really got to push it. Like, leave no stone unturned. I'm like, fuck, I got a goddamn willpower hose of this motherfucker. Watch this. Like, I'll just starve myself. It doesn't matter. And it turns out that just doesn't actually create good results. And so I'm actually going to take more gear this time, back to the usual that I take, eat up to the gear and see how it goes. And hopefully post some pictures in late November that are like, oh, it's like the same I looked as prior to my show, except at 235 or something like that. That's kind of the plan. If that works out, I'll have a 20-week prep for next year's Masters Nationals, where I don't go nearly as quickly and I build muscle through the whole prep, take all the right gear, and hopefully then I probably won't be a heavyweight. Probably be a super, but it doesn't matter because overall is the only thing that matters, and class win. Yeah, the supers are competitive and heavyweights are about the same difficulty of competition at the NPC Masters level, because the supers tend to be not as lean, but they're fucking enormous. The heavyweights are leaner but smaller, so it's kind of like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So that's kind of the plan for now. But I did find it funny when people were like, you just got to eat whole foods and just fucking train to failure. But yeah, they did it for like 8 years. And when I stopped doing that, I had better results. The whole foods thing is just like, people just get upset because you're not like a rice eating bro. And this is like just being uneducated. Now, is there something to be said for like, well, if you have bad reactions to like protein bars and stuff, and they're giving you water under your skin, is a good idea to eliminate them the week before? Yes, absolutely. Except they don't have those reactions. And also, like, when you're that fatigued and that out of shape, it's not the fucking protein bars that are hurting your progress. It's the fact that it's like, oh yeah, like you're crushing yourself with too much of a deficit, trying too late to save it, and all this other stuff. So it could be total bullshit. Like, I kind of wish the answer was like, no, you just need to diet harder and keep pushing it, because that would be straightforward, right? That I can do, but it does not seem to be the case. And in multiple other preps now, looking back on it, halfway through the prep, it'd start to look really, really good, and then we'd crank it, and then I would just look worse and just not as good as seemingly the trajectory was taking. Because usually trajectory in bodybuilding prep is you look pretty good halfway through, and then as you slow your rate of gain down towards the latter half, you start to really come to life and really, like, those last little bits of fat, like, make a huge visual difference. For us, it was like, nope, it's the other way around. Like, look pretty good, and then sliding down the drain. So that's my best take on the matter currently.
It makes sense. Broderick recommended I read The Stress of Life by Hans Seil, and just like that gave me a real appreciation for what the stress response does to the body. And different people deal with stress differently. Unfortunately, I am that guy that's like stressful. And in my first prep, I took Refeed. Second prep, I was just like, the literature doesn't seem to really support them much. I didn't take them. Third one, the one I just did, I regularly had them. And it definitely allowed me to have a lower stress level overall, a more consistent look. And people talk about that anecdotally, like the refeeds kind of refresh the physique, bring back the fullness, and then people can dip back in.
Yes, Steve, fuck, you just took the words right out of my mouth. I think there's a lot to this, and most of the top prep coaches, though they don't have a rationale for it always, they end up doing this. And here it is. You want to know that you're pushing a deficit. The only way reliably you can tell you have a deficit when you're on gear is if you can get flat. If you can flatten out, there is no alternative. You have to have a deficit. There is no way around that, because the only reason you can deplete your glycogen is because it's not being repleted, because there's not enough calories coming in, and the calories all get burned and they never get to your glycogen. It's a fact. While that is true, you also have the countervailing idea that anytime you are flat for too long, your muscles become very catabolic, your fatigue and stress are fucking insane, unsustainable. It's bad news for bodybuilding. If you want to look like an Auschwitz at camp attendee, amazing. Keep it up. Otherwise, bad idea. So after you deplete and flatten out for what I would say is probably like maybe half a week, you fill back out. And then basically you go even a slight surplus, or maintenance it has to be a slight surplus at that point. Refill your glycogen stores. That's when you're going to look your best, just fucking just jacked out of your mind. Everything's tight, everything's big, leaner than last time. And then you dip gently into another hypocaloric phase, just 500 calories. And after a week or 2 or 3 of that, you're going to start to flatten out again. And then you refill. There's nothing magical about the refill. It's just the fact that it's reducing your fatigue, refilling your glycogen stores, so that you can continue to support muscle size and total metabolism and not just shrink down into nothing. So those multiple waves, and you see every single pro that's coached by a top coach goes through these cycles of like, man, really flat today, but I get 1,200 grams of carbs tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And however they're doing it, they're all doing the same thing. They never deplete for too long. I was depleted for at least 6 weeks straight during this prep. Like, Steve, I forgot what pumps felt like, more or less, and I forgot what it was like to look full. Like, I was always flat all the fucking time. And I was even taking some supplements like VAR that were supposed to make me look full as fuck, and it just weren't, because there's just not enough VAR to make that difference. If there's no carbs in your muscles, the VAR got nothing to work with, and you fucking sort of look the same. So there was some time where I was a little bit more repleted, which is when I took those pictures in my the garage setup, the half natty lighting or whatever. Those looked really good. It's veins everywhere, adductor clearly showing, sartorius showing. And then it was like, I just like crushed it again, and then showed up at the show looking like completely like dried up piece of fucking, like a date or something, like a dried date or a fucking raisin. And that idea that you have to stay on that borderline of just a little hypocaloric. And if you are too hypocaloric for too long, you get flatness. That's how you detect that idea that your diet fatigue is too high. You bring it back up, you bring it back down. That also allows you to kind of test how you do with carbs and water, and it'll allow you to know how to peak best. And that's something I sort of wish I was doing. And I'll be trying that next. I'll also try to really establish my maintenance and what it is, because with all the gear and body water going up and down, it's tough to establish maintenance calories. I'm going to try to do that over the next few months before I start the sort of mini cut in October, and kind of get a handle on that. My best guess is it's around 4,000 calories, but it might be a little higher than that. Might be a little lower, so we'll see. But Broderick and I were kind of laughing, and Jared and I were laughing, like, natural prep is, with all due respect to naturals, is like you decrease the food, increase the cardio, you lose weight, and then you get in shape and you go on stage and you flex your muscles and you're lean. Congratulations. There's 2 variables. 3, the weight training variable doesn't really change, so it's 2, food and activity. That's it. Cardio / neat, whatever. With drug stuff, it's much more complicated, and it takes that body weight variable and it no longer makes it indicative. And so then you have to use things like flatness and fullness. And we just haven't been doing that because we thought it was like lame bullshit voodoo that people who just want to eat more on their diets because they don't have mental strength to continue to go through a deficit just use as an excuse because they're too attached to being full and big. And it turns out that while their rationale might be wrong, in many cases, the reality is no. Yes, the best body is achieved by gently easing you into a low body fat state and not punishing you down into there, because if you crash down into it, you're going to look very, very bad, having lost tons of muscle, tons of fullness. My fatigue was so high, I had trouble sleeping, and that just like destroyed the rest of my physique. Athletes should be feeling good because they're athletes. When you're feeling good, your body's performing at its best, and it's burning fat at its best and building muscle and saving muscle at its best. So it's okay at various times for a few days to feel bad and very low energy on prep. But as soon as that happens for a few days, you have to pull yourself back out of it, regroup, and then continue to push a little bit. So we replace the push-pull with just push, and then crazy fatigue, and then nothing happens. So, and one of the reasons I did that is because I wanted to do my best, and I sure as shit wasn't going to eat too much. And it turns out that especially for the other thing with gear is that gear dieting and natty dieting is actually very similar. It's just that if you take a lot of gear, you have to eat up to the gear, because the gear is this huge funnel, this huge mechanism of metabolism. And if you take plenty of gear, but you eat very little food, the actual deficit as felt by your tissues is enormous, because the gear pulls on that as well. And then you end up in a situation where you go just back to the same high-ass diet fatigue. So the reality is, if you want to weigh 220 pounds on stage, well, let's say pick something more realistic, 180 on stage, drug-free is something you've done before. When you take plenty of gear and you're no longer natural, 180 on stage is no longer an option for you, realistically. In order for you to be 180 but taking gear, the gear suction to your metabolism, the amount of throughput it increases is so high, you'll get so diet fatigued trying to get to 180, it's just not going to happen. You can get to 180, you look like shit. You'll be like, what the fuck? I'm taking gear. What is this? The reality is, you now are a person who steps on stage at 195. And if you diet with the same size deficit as you did before, relative to your new intake, your intake is so much higher, you actually end up getting just as lean as you were natural, except 15 pounds heavier. That's what the gear gives you. So Jared and I have been taking gear for some time now, but basically kind of trying to diet down to like a natural body weight. And Jared's problem is a little different than mine. I was trying to make the heavies, and I was trying to do dumb shit like, just push hard for mindlessly. Jared had to make a weight class for classic. And the weight class is 215 pounds, except in his last off season, he was like a not overly fat 260. And so once we ramp the gear up from there into pre-contest, is just categorically out of the option for him to make 215. So he's actually done in classic. And we suspect something at 235 to 240 pounds in his next mini cut, he's going to be looking fucking ridiculous. And you're going to be like, oh shit, okay, that is not a 215 pound person. Interestingly enough, there's a man named Neil something or other. Nail something. He's a classic physique guy. Neil Curry. He's a classic physique guy in the IFBB, or was. And he was sucking down. I remember he was like 235 or 240 with stride at everything. And he was like, fuck, I have to go down to 215. Fuck. He's like, I can't do this anymore. And Greg Doucette made the usual Greg Doucette video where he was like, it's not that you have a problem with your body coming down. It's that you're taking too much gear to make that kind of lightweight. And he's not wrong. He was completely right. But also, if you take less gear, you end up looking smaller. And I don't know if Neil wanted that sort of look. So he made a decision to go to the open, and now he's like 260, except also with striations. You're like, oh my fucking God. I mean, that's how he didn't put on that muscle in the last year. He maybe put on 5 or 10 in the last year. He had so much muscle that he was basically just trying to lose to get down to the weight class. And so when you have gear in the equation, you need to weigh more in order to have your best look lean. And what I was doing is I ended up dropping my gear later in the prep. But by then I was so fatigued, is my best hypothesis, that it was like, all right, now you're lighter and more fatigued. Yeah, fucking damn it. So that's kind of the situation as I see it. So I think the big takeaway from me, and maybe the folks listening to this, is if you want to work really hard and really impose a crazy deficit and really push yourself, just understand that there's a difference between the psychology of how that feels and the reality of what that will do to you. And it's the same analogy with consistent training to failure at excessively high volumes. Because you can train to failure quite productively if you keep your volumes relatively low. There's a balancing act there you can do there for sure. But just training too much and too hard, there's no fucking award given for that. As a matter of fact, you'll just get worse. The same thing is true with dieting. And I know that to be true in theory, but in my own practical existence, I'm like, well, fuck, I gotta be super willpower man and eye laser the fuck out of this. And so, like, yeah, like during the course of this prep, I sort of designed and redesigned like 3 separate products for RP, launched like 2 different divisions, recorded an average of 15 YouTube videos per week, and also did jujitsu full time and did prep and on too few calories. Like, I sure won the willpower award. Yay me. As people sometimes ask, like, how do you do all this? I'm like, well, they can sit in an office all day long. When I'm not in the office, I'm in the gym. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm doing walking cardio. And I'm not doing that, I take an hour or 2 at the end of the day to watch TV with Crystal, and that's it. You know, that's all cool. It's a good story. Like, oh yeah, Mr. Renaissance man. But what we're doing in bodybuilding is a very special, very particular thing. It's very sensitive to fatigue, and the body looks its best when it's in its most relaxed state. And then there you have the problem of, if you impose a fuckload of stress from every angle, you're in a very high stress, high fatigue state. And that's backwards, and it shouldn't be like that. And I'm going to put that hypothesis to the test. Previously, if I look at my preps as fractions of preps, it seems to be a lot of support for it. Broad says that's the thing. I once had a consult with Matt Jansen, and I was like, how much weight are you looking for to have your guys lose, like, per week or whatever? He's like, ideally none, but we just go on appearance and we make the changes as needed. And ideally the less weight they lose, the better. So I was like, fuck, okay, that makes some sense, right? And to me, it was just, I guess I had to do things the old pig-headed way and kind of learn them myself for I don't know, for old time's sake, for pride or some shit.
I have a lot of thoughts, and one of them, comparing like a natural prep to one that's enhanced, is like, you're completely right in terms of, once you've competed once or twice, like, you have a good idea of where your stage weight's gonna be. As a natural, it's not changing a huge amount season to season. You can kind of like, right, I know that's where I need to be. I can kind of set out my target rate of loss. I can watch the scale weight go down, and you kind of have a good idea of where you're going to be. And I also know the situation where if you are in a really fatigued state and you're holding on to body water, you can like look flat but soft, and you're like, if you're in your own head, you're like, I just want to work harder. You can push yourself harder, and that's like the wrong decision to make.
That's exactly what I did about 8 times in this prep. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard when you're in that situation, especially when, I don't know, and it's glorified in some ways, like how prep should feel, and that you should feel terrible, all of this. And the amount of times I've had clients who are like, I don't know, they're 10 weeks out and they're like, Steve, I feel good. Like, shouldn't I feel terrible at this time? Like, no, we want to feel good for as long as possible. How you feel doesn't matter so much as how you're looking, and you're in the right spot. So that bad stuff's going to happen eventually, but for an acute time. And then my other thing for you, Mike, is something I'm hoping to do next time I compete. I didn't really get to do it this last time because there always seems to be another pound to take off. Is you mentioned kind of obviously you get into this really fatigued, high fatigue state, and that's not the best for your look. Something Dr. Joe Klemgreski, I'm going to say his last name wrong, but Dr. Joe.
There's no way to say it right. It has the inordinate number of consonants together. Polish last names you can't say right.
You know Dr. Joe, then you've kind of heard of his...
I know who he is, yes. And I've also looked at his last name and been like, nah, fuck that. I'm not even trying that shit.
And yeah, he's a great guy. And he kind of popularized, I think, this, like he called it, I think, a metabolic building phase, essentially like eating into shows. I'm always hoping to be able to do that. Is that something that you think is... like that would be the perfect situation in terms of you can slowly reduce this calorie deficit, maybe skirt around maintenance, and then just kind of like, you know, people call it this perma-peak state where then you can just kind of go in.
I think if you never go much below 500 or 700 calorie deficit, your ability to reduce the deficit is something that can be done in days instead of like slowly. And that this oscillation between a deficit and a mild surplus is what allows you to push the body fat down and then reduce the fatigue, push the body fat down and then reduce the fatigue, not at the same time, slightly one, then the other, one, then the other, one, then the other. And then when you get to that very, very lean look, you can continue that process very sensitively and more carefully. So you can say, okay, now I'm real lean. I'm really close to being how I want to be on stage, and I'm 4 weeks out. I figure I have another 2 6-day dips into a deficit left over, and the rest of the time I need to spend in maintenance / a slight surplus to fix what I did in the deficit. The net balance of that last 4 weeks ends up being you're eating basically at maintenance and looking your fucking best. You can still make a few changes in there, but I think probably about 2 weeks out, it would behoove most people to never get into the deficit again for the rest of that prep. Maintenance only, even a teeny weeny surplus. The fatigue that you drop from that is going to be so profound, you are going to look fucking amazing. Because fatigue can put 2 pounds of body water on you and take 2 pounds of body water out of your muscles and put them under the skin in a matter of a day. No big deal. High fatigue, 2 pounds plus minus, easy. What is 2 pounds of body fat? That's 2 weeks of dieting. So if you say, well, look, you want me to be in a mild surplus for 2 weeks before a show? I'll get fat. Yes. It's a 100 to 250 kcal per day surplus. Let's run the numbers on what that will gain you body fat wise. Let's just say somehow it's pure body fat that you're gaining. Fuck it. We'll take the worst case scenario. You're getting half a pound a week. That means you're going to gain a pound at most. You're going to get a pound of fat at most through those 2 weeks. If it results in just a pound of intramuscular water addition and just a pound of subcutaneous water reduction, which of course it'll result even more than that, now you look the same. Worst case scenario. Best case scenario, 3 pounds of body water comes out from under your skin and goes into your muscles. And now you look like fucking Thor compared to, oh, but I could have lost another pound of fat. There's so much happening with body water and with intramuscular stuff and with fatigue. Low fatigue environment is so conducive to your best look, especially on stage, that it is super, super important to reduce that fatigue a ton, because yes, cranking that fatigue does benefit fat loss. You will get fat and weight loss. But if you're natural, you're going to get a lot of muscle loss too in those last few weeks if you push the deficit, and some fat loss. It might not be the look you want. And the fat loss is just not an absolute number. It's just not that much. Okay, another pound of fat lost. but at the expense of 5 pounds of visual difference from body and fat. Who gives a, do they have calipers on the fucking stage? Nobody gives a flying fuck. It's all about appearance. And if you're on gear, you can lose some decent fat, but because the gear is such a huge suction for metabolism, you're going to accumulate even more fatigue on the gear than you could drug-free, because the gear will allow you to push yourself further, and then you get so fucked up, your body water, everyone knows body water gets fucked up on gear more anyway, and then you'll get really, really fucked up, and then you'll be in the worst possible position that you could have been. So yes, it is romantic to diet all the way into a show and to impose deficits and be paranoid about gaining fat. It is concomitantly, I think, just as bad of an idea is training as hard as possible all the way up into like a peak for combat sport or a peak for powerlifting. If you're like someone's grinding singles the day before a powerlifting meet, you're like, dude, you're a fucking moron. They're like, I just want to be at my best, you know? It's like, no, that's not how that works. It's not how that works in physique sport either. I'm starting to realize quite late. And I remember there was a guy who was at the New York show Nick and I did first, and people were saying he was going to win, and they were saying things like, yeah, man, like it was Saturday, the show was Saturday, and they're like, yeah, man, last night, Friday, he saw him at the gym, it was like midnight, and he was doing 2 hours of fucking step mill cardio. He was predicted to win. He was phenomenal physique. He didn't win the show. Some other guy did, because he looked tired. And it was like, we should have realized more from there. And at the time, we knew enough theory, Nick and I, to be like, that guy's a fucking idiot. I mean, I wasn't doing high level cardio the day before, but it turns out even a few days before is a bad idea. And even in the weeks leading up to it, fatigue reduction needs to be number one. Kuba Kalin has had a few Instagram posts where he's like, fatigue management is the thing in the last few days leading up. And he actually recounted one prep earlier, maybe one of his first preps, where he was like, I'm paraphrasing. He's like, I ate something like 7,000 calories for 3 days straight, and I still couldn't fill out. I had crushed myself so bad in this prep that it took like a week of insane eating for me to start looking full and big and dry and fucking lean again. It's like fucking insane that I didn't know it was possible to push the body that far. And like today is my third day of eating at a surplus. I was eating at maintenance for a few days after the show, and only today am I now really starting to look big and full again. And I was like, okay, this is a painful lesson. I was that crushed. And so that balancing act of, if you imagine a line here, at maintenance, this is good for muscle gain. This is bad. This is good for fat loss. Fat loss with simultaneous muscle retention and optimization. This is bad. And going here is tempting because it's like, well, just do more and get double the results. But it's analogically similar to like just doubling your training volume. And it's like, that's not a good idea. That's not going to get you anywhere that you want to go. And if you do want to double your training volume, it had better be for a short time and you back off. So the training fatigue and the diet fatigue work almost identically. And for some reason, I thought, well, as long as the training fatigue and the steroids will sort of help with that, I can just diet like a fucking psycho. And it turns out that this just does not accomplish much. And you end up looking like not so great. So.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We created the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
One of the, for people who haven't competed, this kind of scenario where you're not looking your best, it's not the perfect one because you're not as lean, so you don't notice it as well. But I think you've also spoken about this, but I definitely notice it during a mini cut, like as you diet down and it's aggressive because you have the body fat to be able to do it, it's short and you just look flat and a bit fat because you have plenty of fat on you. And then actually the weeks after that is when you to look your all-time kind of best in an off season, because now you've reduced the fatigue, you're back, glycogen's kicking back in, versus like at the end of the mini cut, it's like you kind of look like a shrimp. Not like you just look kind of flattened.
Totally. It's awful. 100%. I ended up looking like basically like that at the show. We're just like, meh. And so, yeah, it sucks. But and you know, I moped for a little bit. I was upset for I gave myself about 2 hours there. So not saying much in the car. The worst part by far of doing poorly at something you've been training for a long time to do, in my view, is the socially awkward position it puts your friends and relatives in. So like Jared was there, Nick was there, Crystal was there, and we're in the car. Like usually I'm Mr. Jokes, man. I'm the guy who's life of the party, and I'm just driving, like saying nothing, and everyone's like, "Oh, you know, what do you say to Mike when he's down?" I'm almost never down. If I'm down, there's just not much to say. And also it's like, would you explain things to him? Well, he's actually the guy who knows things. So maybe ask him, but you don't want to bother him because he looks pissed. You don't have any easy solutions for him. I mean, you may think you have easy solutions for him if you thought that I've thought things through poorly, and you haven't from perusing my Instagram for a day and a half. That just, you know, you're just not having a lot of thoughts. That's okay. But if you know who I am and you don't have much thought I've given this, you're inclined to believe that there's nothing very quick and easy I can say to him that's going to become a revelatory moment of, oh, and here's what you did wrong. You know, is if I'm confused about what happened, don't worry, you're more confused about what happened than I am, even though if you don't know it. The particulars of what's going on with my body, I'm always attuned to more than everyone else. That's the case for everyone, you know? Like if you're coaching a client, you're not like, no, client, here's what happens. Like if they're sufficiently experienced, you're like, well, you tell me what's going on, and then we'll have a conversation. And I'm already, of course, doing that all in my own head. So your friends and relatives end up kind of just coming along for the ride with you. And, you know, it's extra bittersweet to get people's feedback. There's different kinds of bittersweet feedback that you get after you place poorly at a show. One of them is just like the opportunistic critic that's like, well, the reason that you're not fucking in shape is because you don't do shit like I want you to do, which is like insert anything. And you get completely contradictory things from various people. Like you're training too much, not enough. You're dieting too hard, not enough. You know, everyone's got a fine idea, and yeah, some of them might be correct, but not really through any impressive mental abilities of their own, because they're just shooting out ideas into the ether to see what sticks. And so that's kind of painful because there's an audacity there. Like someone did poorly at a show, and you like come in on Instagram comments and you tell them what they're doing wrong. And it's like, first of all, if and when I meet you in real life, you'll just fucking cower and kneel in front of me because you're an online person, not a real life person. And also, I'm smarter than you by a long shot. I know more than you by a long shot. I did this with one guy. I was like, I was in a bad place psychologically, bad place. It wasn't terrible, but I was like, fuck it, I'll lean into this. So one guy was trying to tell me how I should train and how I should use like more like failure stuff and more like body English, like Yates rows and stuff. And so I walked him through this very incredibly slowly and very politely to lead him to the conclusion that I had both done all these things before. They didn't work as well for me, and I had done strict versions of these hardcore lifts and with more weight than he could have done, and my back was bigger by a long shot than his, ratioed to my height, not even ratioed to my height. And he sort of saw himself out of the conversation. It was very nice. At the end, we were nice and friendly, but it was like you actually didn't know what you were saying at the beginning. You don't know what you're saying now. Every thought you had in the interim, I've already thought through 10 years ago and had a better idea than you did. And like basically like nowadays there's like this particular kind of fuck it, I'll just a fucking retard who will accuse me of like not doing enough hardcore like movements. Like he does buck, deadlift, and row. Like motherfucker, I have a whole other. You just Google Renaissance Science, right, on YouTube, Renaissance Science Israetel, and you'll see this whole other YouTube account, which I don't use. It's just my private account. And I used to put videos up of me lifting back in the day. I promise you, I've overhead pressed more than you. I've bent rowed more than you. I've squatted more than you. I deadlifted more than you. And if not, congratulations, you're really big and strong. But it's probably unlikely to be the case. I did all the hardcore shit. I did all that shit to fucking failure, screaming my ass off, blah, blah, blah. that ain't it, and the way I train now is just better. And it's so funny because the hardcore guys, right, there's this mantra like, fuck, you fucking gotta fucking do it, bro, you fucking Dorian did it. Really? Would you say to Kuba Kalin that he's not hardcore? No, they would fucking cower. The guy's like 270 with fucking ab veins. He wouldn't even look in his direction. Yeah, but he's from fucking England, man. He fucking goes to failure. Yeah, he does train to failure consistently. But you know what else Kuba said recently? Free weights are always and everywhere inferior to machines. Could you imagine one of these hardcore bros talking about Yates rows, hearing that from Kuba straight up? He'd be like, but machines are fucking gay, bro. Like, okay. But Kuba's saying that. What do you got to say now? I'd be like, nothing. You never had a thought. You had a feeling. You had like some man shit you need to deal with. Like, I would say just sign up for jiu-jitsu or MMA classes, which is what I did, and help me cure myself of all that man shit. You're in the gym for a psychic experience. You want to push yourself because you feel less than. I got it. I'm here. That's why I bodybuild. But then you go to failure all the time. You do the hardcore shit, not because you think it's most effective. You're not doing a whole lot of thinking. You're doing a lot of feeling. And you feel like, fucking right, man. Fucking Dorian did it. Like, word up. But that actually is not the most effective thing in the world. So I was curious to hear that line of criticism. It hit me out left field. It was like, oh, people still say this? Like, quite strange. And you get people who are like, it's the food. It's the food you're eating. It's too much processed food. And of course, that makes no fucking sense. That's a non-starter. And I was like, okay, I'll hear this out. And why do you think? And they never quite know. It's like, oh, all the guys fucking do it. And you're like, really? You know all the guys? They know what they do? No. Okay, fine. They didn't know that. And then you get other folks who are much more well-meaning. And they'll say things like, well, you actually looked really good up there. And I'm like, well, that's actually not true, and so it's tough. I usually don't reply with like, no, that's not true. But I'm like, oh, thanks. I wish that was the case. But it's nice to, and then other folks will ask like, is it the judging? Is there like a bias? I'm like, no. And I've had that after a few of my shows, people be like, is it the judging? I'm like, no, man, the judging, I'll say this, judging in bodybuilding is almost always completely objective. You get a couple of weird judgments here and there. At the very top of the top, who the top two guys are at the Olympia might have some politics behind it. Almost never is there politics other than that. As if almost every list of show picks that I look at, I'm like, yeah, that guy won. It's not that hard to tell. And like Justin Shire just won the Chicago Pro. This is obvious. Of course he fucking won. Look at him. And all the other guys are great, but it's just not as great enough. It is fucking politics. Like, no, it's not, bro. No, it's not. And if you go to the shows in real life, you realize really it's not politics, because sometimes pictures are a bit different. I've been to a few Olympias, and afterwards I read the comments on the internet. They're like, man, Phil should have never won. Kai looked better. As a 2013 Mr. Olympia, I believe, something, was it 2013? Around there, 2013, 2014, one of those Olympias. And it was Phil versus Kai rematch number 2 or something. And I remember seeing Kai on stage and being like, holy fucking shit. And then seeing Phil and being like, it's over. This Phil, he'd barely walk because he had to walk with his hips doing this because his quads were too big for him to walk like a normal person. And he's Phil Heath, so it's all artistic looking. Like, what the fuck? And his density was just out of this world. He turned around here, real by, and I was like, the show's over. And of course it was. And then you got like 10,000 people online being like, Kai got robbed. You got to be there, man. Because like, I'm a huge Kai Green fan as a human being, and I love his physique. But like, when they stood next to each other in real life, you're like, okay, I know who's fucking winning this. And it's not like it's Phil Heath conspiracy or anything like that. He really is just the fucking best in the world. There's no way to go around that. So it's weird to get comments from people in a nice way of like, oh, like you looked good, or the competition was really intense. Like, so people try to cut you slack. At the end of the day, when, I've coached for a long time. When an athlete of mine does poorly, you give them some space and some quiet, and you say, hey, I'm ready to chat whenever you are. Okay. Love you. Let me know. And when they're ready to chat with you, they come back more calm, and they're like, hey, like, so let's chat. And then you chat very, very calmly, and, get to like, okay, where can we go from here? I had just done that with Jared a few weeks ago, and then I was sort of doing it with myself. And it also sucks because you work so hard for something like this. I mean, like, this was the only show I was doing this year. And someone asked, like, oh, are you going to hop into a show, like, you know, in 4 weeks to like redeem yourself or whatever? I was like, no, I have a chock full training and work schedule. Like, they sure as fuck don't pay me to do bodybuilding shows, you know, like, and at the end of the day, my income is 50 trillion times more important to me than bodybuilding could ever be, just because I'm an alive, rational human being. Like, you know, I need a pro card. Like, I need a fucking extra pair of fancy shoes. It would be nice, but it's not, you know, compared to like income stream, YouTube, RP, the app, like not even close, right? So I was like, no, it's not in the cards for me to do this again. So I have to wait probably another year to compete. There's a lot of pain involved in that psychologically, of like, fuck, man, fuck, like, really? That's all this for this? And it takes some time to process that. And what I've gotten out of it so far is I'm still downstairs every day. I work a little bit on my time machine, but I haven't quite gotten it perfected. There's no time machine yet. So any amount of frustration or I wish I would have kind of thoughts about the show are something you need to think through and feel through, and then logic your way to saying, you know, I'm not going to indulge those thoughts anymore. What can I do now to become better for later? So some people were kind of maybe taken aback on social media. I was like, yep, time for off season. They're like, really? Like, just like that? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm just trying to get better again and regroup, and I have to drop the fatigue. No matter how I looked, I'm still really fatigued. So there's this, like, because I didn't look my best, there's kind of this like, oh, but I'm still in the fight. Like, no, you have to walk away from the fight, regroup, and come back. That's painful. That's difficult. If someone offered me a magical ability to continue to diet in some vacuum for another 6 weeks and redeem myself, oh my God, I'd take it in an instant. But that's not a good idea. And so mentally you have to reframe. It's so easy to do well and to be like, off season, food, training, pumps, it's great. More difficult to be like, I sucked. Off season, food, training, pumps. And it's like, but I feel like I didn't earn it. I feel like I didn't even get lean enough and show off enough leanness to be like deserving of an off season. And that's where you make a huge mistake, because you start to treat bodybuilding as a moralistic, emotional thing rather than a purely mechanical thing. And like, your body has to heal, food has to be introduced, new phase of training, and next show will have to be later. So, you know, like, live to fight another day kind of mentality, which I absolutely fucking hate, but it's also the best idea. And so I have to wrap my mind, and I'm currently in the process of wrapping my mind around the fact that, like, okay, I did poorly. There's not anything I can do about it now except put my best foot forward in this next thing that I'm doing now, which sets me up to do my best possible later. And again, and something I did put on Instagram was, I'm not a stranger to losing. Like, if I was like an all-time, like, there's people who never lose a wrestling match until they hit like their junior year of high school, and some guy moves from another state and he beats them. That is a loss you have to process for a long time, because you're not even used to losing. I started out losing and I've lost before. I've won before. I've lost more than I've won. So me losing again blows, but I'm like, yeah, like, I know how to get back out from under this rock. This is where I live. You know what I mean? So that's, I put up that whole, like, I was born a loser post, which people apparently seem to like a lot, according to Instagram. But it was like, you know, that's the mentality you have to have of like, okay, fine, I lost. Okay, fine, fuck it. Now what? I'm not giving up. I'm not retooling my whole approach or like continuing to diet or some stupid shit like that. If I could, I would, but it's not on the schedule. So now I do my best with putting together a good off season and putting together a good prep and getting back at it, learning as many lessons as I can. So it's easy for me to say this, and it looks like I'm having fun and smiling right now. Internally, it's a little painful still, but it's just exactly as true if it's painful as if it's not painful. It's still true. This is still the best move forward. And it'll feel nice and redemptive when I come back and win stuff and look my best, or not, or I'll never get it right. And I'll have to retire from bodybuilding, having said that I've never achieved my ultimate goals and never gotten it right. And I am absolutely prepared for that as well. It might happen. It's not entirely in my control. I might break my leg tomorrow and the doctor's like, oh, you can never bodybuild again, whatever. And it'll have to be a thing that happens. So all we ever have is our ability to do our best going forward. That's all you ever have. And there's never a good alternative, because what is the alternative? Time machine doesn't work. Try the same shit that failed again, but harder. Curious idea, but clearly doesn't work. mope and be pissed and quit for a while, that ain't me. Moping is ridiculous. The longer it lasts, the worse it is. At some point, I just get over myself. I'm like, well, I'm not that pissed anymore. Fuck it. Like, let's go eat and train. And nothing is good for your soul like getting back into some food and some training after a bodybuilding show, feel your swag again. So at that point, it's like, okay, we'll just do a similar thing with some modifications and try to do it better next time. You know, it's like a real huge cliche to be like, it's not about how often you fall, it's about how you get up or whatever. And, you know, of course, that can be exaggerated. But what is very important is how do you recover from not doing your best psychologically? Because I know people that actually just quit the sport. Tons of people quit the sport after they don't do well in all sports. Maybe most do. One of the reasons that masters bodybuilding is not as competitive as bodybuilding in the open is because most people quit by then. It's not actually an age thing. You know, people say there's a 35 to 39 class, and then next year I'll turn 40 in May and I'll be in the 40 to 45 class. 40 to 45 is where most Olympians peak. 35 to 39 is where most of them used to peak historically. Now they peak a little later, but around age 40 is when you become your best possible version of yourself, a little before, a little after. So you would say, like, well, how come the Masters division isn't as competitive? It's because almost everyone's either pro or quit. Most people just don't hang in there long enough. And one of the reasons is they just can't stand losing for that fucking long, because it fucking sucks. But for me, I like the process of bodybuilding so much, I would do it anyway, even if I wasn't competing, and I might as well compete. And I've, you know, I'm giving myself, I'm going to be 40 soon, give myself till age 42 to really try at Masters competition for a while. And so I'll continue to do that. But yeah, you know, can't all be victories, and how you respond to defeat is important. And the best thing you can do is process, find a plan, begin to execute plan, become happy and positive again, and say, you know, I think next time I can do the right things and I can be better. If you don't believe that, definitely don't bodybuild. And if you like let the cloud of pessimism hang over your head, which is just bad for your life and for training, there's no reason to get down on yourself. Just try again, dust off, try again. Thing is, the person that dusts off and tries again, if they keep coming back, is a dangerous person because you can't really stop them. So trying to channel that energy, maybe it'll work.
Or the saying is something like, if you keep going, you can't fail. Like if you keep going, there is no failing because you're still trying.
The reality of that is you actually can continue to fail if you keep going. You can just be a failure the rest of your life and die trying and never succeed. That is absolutely possible, even if you keep going. But you can always just stop and stop trying. Is that a good idea? Maybe it is. And if you decide, okay, I'm going to keep going, then it might as well be with a positive winner, kind of an abundance attitude of like, well, like, I think I can do better. Because if you don't think you can do better, why the fuck are you doing it? I think I can do better. I think I'll step on stage looking way better. That's my plan. That's my hypothesis. If I really do believe that, I should be open-minded and pretty optimistic, as opposed to just like brooding for a year and being pissed and thinking about all the people that doubted me or whatever. What the fuck? There's not even real people that doubt me. Nobody gives a flying fuck. I'm not even known for being a good bodybuilder. I'm just known for being a YouTube celebrity at this point. So fuck, who cares?
I always find it funny when people are like, I'm like trying to prove my haters wrong or whatever. And I'm like, man, do you really have haters? Like most people don't truly have like proper haters. I would say you're probably at a size though, Mike, where there's some people out there that are like wanting you to fail. And
no, totally. But here's the thing. Those people we can subcategorize into a few different groups. One, like dickless pieces of shit that would never look in my direction in real life. And that's most of them, because like I'm not so pleasant to look at in real life. People realize I'm a lot bigger than I seem. My head looks really scary in real life. I do have a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If shit comes down, there are people that can beat me up. There's not that many of them. And as a real human being, like, you know, man to man, like a real human male in front of you, you act different than you do on the fucking internet. I remember one of my friends, Chad Dresden, who'd been in like, he's like a U.S. Marine, Iraqi war veteran, 270 pounds, jiu-jitsu blue belt at the time. Now he's much better. You know, like quite sauced, and had been in like a trillion street fights before, like a fucking hardcore motherfucker. And he got into some beef with some folks from like West Side or whatever. And someone on the internet was like, dude, you better be careful. He's like, what are they going to do? Come to my gym and beat me up? Like, I'd like to see them try, and maybe they would. It would take like 5 guys or some shit. Nobody really does that. So on them, I get a big response out of, especially when you're on gear, especially when you're just lost, and someone says an Instagram comment to you like that's hateful. You're like, I want to fucking try that shit in real life, pussy. Try it. And if they never will, you'll never see that. And if they do, I'll see you in jail, right? But that never happens. Like, how many times have you actually read about a fist fight between bodybuilders or powerlifters? It basically just doesn't happen. Because in real life, these motherfuckers are quiet as shit. So first of all, there's that category. Second of all, what kind of person goes and says negative things on someone who does poorly? A motherfucker that's like really in a bad place. A person who goes through friends quite quickly, or not quickly at all, just never has them. The incel vibes, and not in the unfortunate, like, oh, just not attractive enough, don't have game to get a girl. Like, I'm not talking about actually involuntary celibate. I'm talking about like the person nobody wants to hang out with, that has very few friends, a negative, downer, pathetic fucking person who's barely got their own life together. You know who never talks shit on a person's page when they do poorly? Champion bodybuilders. No champion bodybuilder I knew said some shit to me that was like, dude, you suck. And a couple of them will say things sort of that similar to that, but they're not that good. And they're better than me at bodybuilding, but not by much. And they're worse than me at about everything else. So it makes sense they got a little hate in their heart, or they're just on cycle. When you're not enough trend, you want to talk shit to everyone online. So when you get rid of the categories, what is the remaining category of those people who you actually have to listen to that have something valuable to say? And some of them do. Some of the criticisms I received from people, even when phrased negatively, were actually very, very spot on. And I'm like, God damn it pains me to admit this, but you're fucking right. And there's like maybe 1 or 2% of your quote unquote haters that will ever give you any kind of feedback that's meaningful. The rest of them are just people having a bad time in their own head, and they need to spew that shit. Anytime I talk shit on the internet, I really hate, like for real hate. I'm just in the worst possible position in my own head. I feel less than. I feel like a dying squirrel. You try to help it, and it goes, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna fucking touch the squirrel anymore. So that's where the haters come from. So you actually can have real haters, but these are not people you want to spend much time thinking about, because there's no winning. You can prove to them that you're the best, and one of two things will happen. They'll be like, hey man, respect. And you're like, great, I gained this fucking random idiot's respect after 2 years of thinking about him every day in the shower and wishing I could pull his jaw off his fucking body. What the fuck? A shitty ROI is that? Or they're like, yeah, but your glutes still weren't as dry. I think that pro card was a gift. And then my next thing would be to DM them and be like, where do we meet so I can kill you with my fucking hands? And that's what it ends up being, is all this is just stupid bro guy shit. It's like the equivalent of like Mean Girls, like what girls do, like rumor spreading, except guys just are more direct to each other. So it's you see us all the time on Instagram, tons of other people. Of course, the YouTube comments are even worse, is even more anonymous. But at the end of the day, like, there's just not much of it that's relevant whatsoever. And these aren't the kind of people you want to relate to anyway. And some of them are in that kind of incel mindset, and they get out of it with their own success a few years later. And they end up being like, yeah, I used to be a real fucking idiot on the forums and stuff, and I don't do that stuff anymore because it just made me feel really bad when I did it. No one's having fun when they're making fun of other people. It feels good a little bit. And then you're like, I'm some clown on a forum. That's all I am. I have an anonymous, I don't even have my picture up. And if you are like, I'm actually a really good bodybuilder, I have my own picture, I'm making critiques, shouldn't you be like thinking about how to improve yourself? Thank you for caring enough about me to give me criticism, by the way. Are you on my team, I guess? Is if you thought, there's a term in poker called don't educate the fish. And it means if someone's playing poorly against you, don't teach them how to play, take their money off of them. So if you're really a hater, you're not going to give me tips. So in a sense, your haters are like, man, you shouldn't be doing RIR. They're actually trying to help you, which means they hate you, but they kind of want to see you succeed in a certain way. A lot of weird swirl of psychology in there. You're better off just sticking to like, okay, I'm going to collect insight from everyone I can, haters included. I'm going to see who has good points, who has bad points, what my own ideas are, talk to my coaches, come back with a new battle plan that's tweaked and what I think my next best idea is, and go execute. And I just wouldn't focus on the haters much. Another thing is, if you read enough hate stuff, that's just like what you spend your time doing, and then you spend your time just in hate, and like you know, I have better things to do with my time than read shitty Instagram comments, because as I'm gaining more popularity, which luckily our YouTube is exploding and all that stuff, I just get more lovers and more haters. And if I spend time on the hate, why? Can you imagine, like, 20 years from now, I have like $100 million in net worth, and like, Mike, how would you describe the last 20 years? I'm like, I spent most of that time just reading hate comments. Like, really? So most of the time you spent in a bad mood, like, did it help you at all? Like, no, not really. My work and productivity is something I really need haters for. I just really read it and really get pissed. What a tremendous waste of time. And the internet, it's really interesting. There's been many hypotheses of what's going on with social media. How are things different from perspective of politics or whatever? I think one thing that very few people get is this. The internet and forums is the first time that the world gets to hear from the rest of the world. When you win a local championship show in 1995 in Teaneck, New Jersey, you get to hear from your friends, from relatives, and a few of the guys backstage and the judges. When you win the show in Teaneck, New Jersey in 2025, you get to hear from everyone in the fucking world if they just go to your Instagram profile. And it turns out that most people in the world are just fucking great. How do I know this? Look at the ratio of views to likes to comments on a YouTube video. Views will be huge. Comments will be, or likes will be a ton. Comments will be usually a 10th or 100th as many as likes that you get. Even likes. Everyone who liked the video is like giving you positive energy. They don't just like videos randomly. So you get like 100 likes and 10 comments, and 5 of those comments will be pure fucking vile. Those are the people that are fucking vile. You found them because the internet connects everyone. And people ask, like, politically, we're all fucked up. Like, no, there's just more people saying stuff about politics. It used to be like you got your politics from the New York Times, the Washington Post. Like, Jim Bob didn't have his own fucking magazine. You would never hear from Jim Bob in Alabama. But now you go on a picture of Donald Trump on Instagram, and Jim Bob's the first comment, upvoted 1,000 times. I tell you what, Trump's fucking should be king, goddamn it. Woo. And you're like, wow, we're all so fucked. It's like, no, same people. You just get to hear from more people that you usually wouldn't have. So taking that approach to social media and physique sport, it's like, are you interested in hearing from just way more random people? The beauty is you get a lot of amazing insight. But the problem is this. It's the same problem as with Yelp reviews on restaurants. There's a bias in comments. Generally, if people have a positive experience with you, they're unlikely to comment. If they have an incredibly positive experience or they're just really social, they'll comment. But that's not most people. But if people have a negative impression or idea of you or review, they're much more likely to comment. So there's an inherent negative bias in comments. And I would off the back of the envelope, I would say it's 90% tilt. There's a 90 to 10 ratio of negative to positive comments that would have been. In reality, that's still most positive comments, or even, 50-50 positive negative. But because you're fighting that 9 to 10, if you actually polled all of the people that, let's say, watched one of your YouTube videos, Steve, you found them at home and you were like, do you like Steve Hall? 99% of the people that actually watch your videos voluntarily, I might add, would be like, yes, of course. But 10,000 people watch one of your videos after a week. 99%, that leaves us with 100 people who fucking hate you. And guess what? 20 of them will be in the comments section. So you'll be like, oh my God, I have mostly fucking haters. And that's not true. That's not even remotely true. And so if you just read all the hate stuff all the time, you end up being like, man, the world has a lot of hate in it. And it does numerically, but fractionally, most people are totally great and supportive. And how do you know that in real life? Everywhere I go, gyms, airports, whatever, I've never had anyone stop me and be like, Mike Israetel, I hate you. But I've had tons of people be like, dude, you're the fucking man. You changed my life, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Can you give me money? I don't change lives for free. You give me a $20 bill, I fuck off. Typical interaction. But in any case, it's easy to get caught up in that negativity cycle. And it sounds like a bitch ass thing to be like, man, like, I don't even want to be, I want just positivity, man. I don't want negativity. I don't read my Instagram comments. Yeah, sure, I read them. But I just don't put much stock in them. Because there's a vast disproportionate number of haters, and vast disproportionate number of those people are people who maybe don't lift weights, who don't have Instagram profiles. And a few bodybuilders who are pretty decent will say not nice things, but they're just mostly guys having a bad time or giving me free advice. Thanks, fellas. And again, and the real life thing, come punk me out in real life. Watch it get beat up.
I think it was David Goggins I heard or something where he like got a load of his hate comments and recorded him speaking them into something and would play it for some reason. Anyway, that's just a random psycho. You could imagine David Goggins. You could imagine him doing that though, couldn't you, to get through some of his crazy runs and things. Yeah,
when you need it, you need it. But then again, fueling with negativity is probably not the best thing in the world. Michael Jordan did that as well. Michael Jordan he is the old school social media where it was like news reporters. Some news reporter would be like, I don't think Mike played his best game last night. And he would like read that line in the news 20 times over. And next time you'd find that news reporter after like backwards slam dunking and winning the game by 20 points, you'd find him on the fucking line. He'd be like, you motherfucker, you, fuck you. And the guy'd be like, what? Oh, okay. I guess this is all for me. He's like, yep, never fucking underestimate me. Jordan's not a happy guy. I don't know if you've seen any documentaries.
I watched it. Yeah.
Like still like he drinks a lot. His eyes are red all the time. I don't know if Jordan's like in his soul super fucking happy. And did he need to be negative to get his motivation? I don't know. There's tons of other people that motivate mostly on positivity, and they're still champions. So, and there's always a balancing act where if there's not enough negativity, that's bad, because then you're just a Pollyanna out in the woods picking berries, and you're like, people just tell you you're amazing and you're not. Like, oh, like, people are like, oh, you looked great, Dr. Mike. Like, no, I fucking didn't. Get the fuck out of my face. Thank you so much for saying that. I know where you're coming from. It just is not true. But then there's also the too much hate stuff. So you have to be aware of what the critiques of you are and logically think about, is this a valid critique, or is this just a person having a bad time in their head? And 90% of the time, they're just having a bad time. 10% of the time, they made a fucking great critique, and you should incorporate it into your plan.
I know you said, I think it was a comment surrounding Jared, or he said this, where it's like people critiquing him and he's thought about that. Like he's thought about the negative aspects of whatever he's doing and his physique more times than you've thought about it. Like for most cases, like you said, some people have a relevant critique, but in like 9 times out of 10, the individual involved who is a like high level thinker has already thought about it much more.
Yeah. It would be cool if you could catch someone like that slipping and give them an insight that they've never come across. Sometimes it happens, but it's rare. And so if you're a person who's commenting free advice to people, there's a huge Dunning-Kruger thing there. And it's like the Thomas Sowell version of the Dunning-Kruger, where you don't have the relevant information to form a holistic picture. You think you have the relevant information. It's like, the economic analogy was, European governments would tell colonial farmers in Africa how to farm in Africa, and then entire crops would be lost. Because you're not in Africa, you don't know what the water levels are, you don't know what the soil looks like. Just let the African farmers do it. They do it, they're amazing at it. And it's like, okay, maybe we should leave the local expertise to the local experts. So in the same way, if someone asks, hey, what's going on with my prep? Again, unless I'm your prep coach, I actually don't know, and I don't have any quick advice. Most of the people in my feed that are the smartest people, Joe Jeffrey, et cetera, they're not messaging me quick advice and, hey, this is going to fix you. They're reverent. They know this is a complex problem, and Mike sure as fuck thought it through. There's a chance he's doing something really stupid to fuck it up, but that chance is probably pretty low. And it's still extant and still a great conversation, but I'm just not going to be my first assumption, because I could clown myself if I say that. So when, people, this goes as far as people asking for, this is a very typical question on social media, like, hey, my knee hurts when I squat deep. What do you think the issue is? That is an intractable question. It's actually impossible to answer, because there are at least 1,000 things that could be wrong with your knee, including it's entirely psychosomatic and there's nothing wrong with your knee. And that's probably 90% of the time what's going on. So if that's the case, how the fuck am I supposed to tell you what's wrong with your knee? I'm Mr. Expert, right? I don't know. But if I don't know and I'm keeping back, Dr. Quinn Hennock, he doesn't know. He's not going to say anything. Adam Meekins, he's not going to know. He's not going to say anything. And then there's 80 guys in the comments telling that guy what's wrong with his knee. And they all have no profile picture or whatever. Or they've been PTs for 3 months. It's, you fucking moron. Good luck embarrassing yourself. It's like, rocket takes off and then it crashes, like Elon Musk's fucking Starship. And they're like, I'll tell you what's wrong with it. Like, shut your fucking mouth. You have no fucking clue. Now, maybe you do. and it's good to listen to everyone, but we got to understand, and most people's ideas offhand about what you're doing wrong, they're not even in the position to begin to critique you. Not like in a how dare you, I'm Dr. Mike, I know things. I don't know that much. I make mistakes all the fucking time, clearly. But maybe I've thought of some things, and maybe your easiest hypotheses I've already thought of and refuted. And maybe I've already tried. Maybe I've been lifting weights for 25 years. Maybe I tried them 10 years ago. You didn't even know who I was. You weren't even lifting weights back then. So that's what, the people that say, you got to just fucking crush everything to failure. Like, shut the fuck up. Shut up. I was you, except tougher and bigger and stronger and for longer. And I trained harder than you. And I went to failure all the time. And when I stopped doing that, I got better. Exactly as theory would predict. So do you think I'm going to go back to doing my old stupid bullshit that got me to look like you look, motherfucker? No, that doesn't work. But they don't know that. And so in their defense, they're just people who are frustrated at seeing someone fuck up, and they want to give you a piece of their mind and be like, let me fucking help you, dumbass. Diet for longer. Do this, do that. Here's my best idea. And it's cool. Thank you for your ideas. Maybe you're right. But to that person, and if you're a person who is going to make a suggestion to someone on social media, it's a yin and a yang is all I'm saying. On the inside, it's like, yes, tell them what you think. Offer them some fucking help. Clearly they suck. Clearly they could use some advice. But the yang is, are you so sure your advice is remotely informed enough to have a high probability of being correct? It's okay if it's not. There's a spectrum on which, though, if it's often not the right advice, you're neither very helpful because you give bad advice, and you look like a fucking clown. And it's okay to look like a clown if you're good with that thing. I have numerous people who I know on my Instagram who will give unsolicited advice to myself or anyone else I mention at the drop of a hat. And 95% of the time, they're not even cognizant enough of the entire problem to give the correct beginning of advice. And I know them as clowns. I'm not going to say what their names are in here as it's mean. They're fucking clowns. And everyone who knows things laughs at them behind their back. And it's not like you wore an outfit and you're all LGBT or whatever and we're laughing at you. That's lame as fuck. We shouldn't be laughing at people just for being different. We're laughing at you because you are trying to critique other people and you're doing it so wrong. It's embarrassing, but you don't even know because you're that checked out. Remember, that kind of thing exists. So next time you want to give criticism to someone, definitely fuck them, pussy ass motherfuckers. We live in a bitch ass society. Give them that criticism. Give me criticism. I'm not soft. Come at me on Instagram. Tell me how bad I am at everything. I love it. I want more. But just consider that while you're doing that, you may be embarrassing yourself. You wouldn't know. Everyone else knows. And you build a reputation. And then so even in your little bullshit forum that you talk shit in, at some point 6 months later, all your boys are going to be like, yeah, but Frank, like, man, you don't really know a lot. And you'll be like, what? But I've given all this advice to pros. Like, Steve, you ever see like Big Ramy will post a physique pic and there's guys giving him advice?
Always.
Like, I just want to pause one of those guys and be like, you do understand the absurdity of the situation you're in, yes? And like, if it was Eric Helms giving Big Ramy advice, I'd be like, okay, Eric, you're half the size, but also you've gotten shredded before, and also you've coached a ton of people, and also you have a PhD, and also you're really smart, world expert. It's okay, maybe Big Ramy does need to hear what you say, and maybe not. But if you're like just some guy who's lifted weights for 2 years and you're giving Big Ramy advice, it's like, whoa. I mean, there is a chance you're giving good advice, but I wouldn't bet on that. So before I ever give anyone, like, Steve, how many times have you seen me give intricate advice on Instagram to anyone?
Yeah, zero.
Anyone. It's crazy. First of all, you have to pay me for that shit.
Yeah.
But second of all, like, I'm just not sure because I need to know a lot of specifics. And then I can give you a list of candidate hypotheses that you might want to try. That's how the shit works in real life. You know, you'll see Hani Rambod on there just going to other fucking pros and be like, what you need to do is cut your water early. Like, he doesn't know what you're doing. And if you want him to coach you, it's going to cost you a lot and he'll do a great job. But a lot of the top coaches, they say, look, I can't come in 2 or 3 weeks before your peak. I need to do a whole prep. And I even need to do your off season so we learn how your body responds to various things, various compounds, various amounts of food, various cardio, so that we get that remember that thing, the maintenance surplus deficit line. What drug, what fluids, what foods, what training, what nutrition keeps you in this fine balance of perfection? And then we can begin to dip you in and out of to get the results that you want. Yeah. There's an audacity of giving free advice, and it's totally great to give advice, but remember the audacity. is a thing. It's almost like it's totally cool to approach girls in the mall and ask them out. But if your game is, hello, you are beautiful, would you go on a date with me? Like, there's better ways to do it. Don't do that. Yeah. Maybe it's totally great that you're doing it. Namaste. I'm not trying to stop you, but there's better ways. You're clowning yourself is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I completely agree. And audacity was the word I was literally going to come out with. Right? I just think it's like the audacity of people where even if someone was wanting to give advice, unsolicited feedback, if they haven't asked for it, like on the post, like, I don't know, you posted your physique and I was like, oh, my physique was terrible. What do you guys think? Yeah, cool. Now they can come in. But you would ask, right? You would be like, do you want my feedback?
Yeah. Some people were defending me on one of those posts against one guy, and specifically, and the guy's like, I don't know why you guys are like clapping back at me. He literally asked for advice, and I never got back to him because fuck him, whatever. But like, I literally didn't. So there's nothing in my post was like, give me advice. He's like, he literally asked for advice. The guy like hallucinated it, you know? He misinterpreted something I said. I think I said, I'm not really sure what's going on, but I'll give it some thought. He's like, he's asking for advice. Like, no, he's not. And again, it's totally cool to ask advice. Yes, you're a clown if you get it wrong. I'm a clown for looking like a fucking joke on stage, of course, right? No, like, yeah, fine, I'm okay to be a clown. But most of those guys, if you're like, dude, you're clowning yourself with your advice, they're not going to admit it the other way around. They're going to be like, yeah, I guess we're all clowns. You'll be like, oh man, I'm right. It's like, no, you're not. So, and again, when guys discover that they know the formula for what really treats them well, they're just going to keep it to themselves. They're going to look better than Dr. Mike. They're going to be showing up on stage with sharp glutes every time, winning stuff. And then when people ask him, what do you think of Dr. Mike? They'll be like, he's a fucking clown. And they're going to be like, why don't you go tell him that? I'd be like, fuck what I want to tell him that for? I don't want him to wake up and start doing better. I hate that guy. So the advice game on Instagram is it's a big minefield. And if you want to take advice, understand that there's a huge negativity bias, but that there's still some really great advice if you want to sort through some of that negativity. Just don't stay there for too long. Get the good advice. Just go through all the comments and be like, is this person making a good point potentially, or are they just having a lot of feelings, right? Because mostly just have a lot of feelings, right? So feelings. That's a good point. Could have dieted for longer. Feelings. And I'm done. I'm done on that comment section, and I've got what I need. But on the other hand, if you are interested in giving advice to folks on the internet, understand that because the situation you're rendering advice to is something you don't know well, the person in the weeds knows much more about it than you do. You could be making yourself look fucking stupid, and everyone could be getting that in this social media circle that you run in. They just know you as the guy that embarrasses himself with advice. Again, I know at least 5 people offhand, which I could tell you their names. And you're like, oh yeah, that guy, what a fucking clown. I'm not going to say that because I don't want to contribute to bullying culture. It's mean. It's not nice. But like, next time you want to critique anyone, just remember that criticism can come off very respectful and awesome. And it can come off even very incisive and mean, but still super fucking true. So you get to pat yourself on the back for being right. Most of the time it doesn't come off like that. Most of the time it's like, actually you have no idea what you're saying, and you're fucking embarrassing yourself. So have a little bit of reverence before you critique. But if you do critique, feel free to be incisive, because criticism is a huge part of how we all get better, which is why, like, I don't like that toxic positivity shit. Like, there'll be posts that mostly social justice warriors will post, and then you'll try to get in the comments to even ask a question. And it's like, certain comments are disabled for this post kind of shit. I'm like, what is this? Yeah, really? You're like not interested in any feedback? And that's crazy. So there's some extremes. Psychocritical extreme, psychopositive extreme. You want to be a little bit closer to the middle. Take the criticism, take what is good out of it. Don't read it anymore for just pure hate, and then try to do your best and stay positive and thinking you're going to do better next time. That's it. That's as far as I've wrapped the whole thing up.
Yeah. No, I think, and on that, I've already kept you an hour and a half, so I appreciate the time, and I'm glad we could dig into your prep, and it seems like there was some lessons there that you can take moving forward, and hopefully some lessons for people. I mean, I think every person listening has that kind of, if they're a bodybuilder, everyone has that little devil on their shoulder that's just like, push harder, make sure you leave no stone unturned.
Yes, like, it's a good thing to have too, because if you don't have them at all, you don't push hard, you're not a champion. But there's such a thing as pushing too hard, and some of us are prone to pushing too hard. And listen, if you're a retort right now watching this, is Mike's such a fucking pussy. He thinks he's pushing too hard, but he's not pushing hard enough. I hope you're correct, because I got way more hard pushing to do. That would be so fucking awesome if it was super straightforward. Just push harder, get even more fatigued, crush yourself, and eventually, magically, you'll be a champion. Like, that would be unbelievable. Like, that's how they do it in Dragon Ball Z, right? They get into a state of overreaching that's basically near death, and then Vegeta's like, oh, I'm a Super Saiyan now. Like, so, you know, I hope you're right, folks out there saying I'm not working hard enough. We're going to try the opposite, where I think I'm pushing it too hard. So in mid-November, we'll put up some pics and we'll see which one is right.
I will guess that that's going to be very positive, because of everything you described there makes a ton of sense to me, and in my experience, and just everything you spoke about just makes so much sense. And yeah, thank you again, Mike. And I don't know if I need to labor the point in terms of where people can find you, because you are, like you said, exploding on YouTube, over on Instagram. There's a lot of people over there, but I might as well ask if people do want to find you, and I'll make sure it's linked in the description too.
Thank you so much,
or
Steve.
If you've got anything going on.
Renaissance periodization. Steve, when does this video go up?
So this will come out at the end of August. So it will actually be before the final. People might be able to still get spots. We may have tickets still left for the London seminar / kind of training group.
Guys, that's going to be a really exclusive event. You can see me live in London. Myself, Jared, IFB Pro, Nick Shaw, IFB Pro. Dr. Crystal will be there. There's going to be Pascal and Steve are going to be coaching people through the lifts. We're going to have master classes about success. We're going to be having some fucking meals together. Check out the London RPX Revive Stronger seminar, link probably in this YouTube video. And we'll see you there in real life. Otherwise, I will see you guys at Renaissance Periodization YouTube, or just like Google Exercise Scientist Critiques Hollywood Workouts, because that's our new thing that apparently people love, and I have a natural knack for being a piece of shit to people I've never seen on the internet. But you know, Hollywood motherfuckers, you're too rich, you get an exemption. I don't care about being mean to Hollywood. And by the way, for reference, it's all a joke. It's fun and games. You know, I'm not, because I tell you what, it does actually keep me awake at night to think of how mean I am to those trainers. Like, if I was one of those trainers of the Hollywood people and I saw the video, I'd be furious, or like really dejected. And it's not pleasant for me to make fun of people. But what I said at the first couple videos, and I stopped saying since then, so it's quite obvious, but I would like to say at least here so it's on the record. It's all, what do you guys call it in the UK? It's all banter. Right. Yeah. It's all, which is a great term we don't have in America. Just BSing, I guess you would say. It's just all jokes, right? And at the end of the day, all those trainers, when I say they're doing a bad job, I do mean it. I really do think they're doing a bad job, but that doesn't mean they're bad humans. They just need to learn some more things, and then they can do a good job. I used to be the worst trainer than all of them. So when I'm critiquing trainers and Hollywood people, it's all from like a comedic perspective of trying to get people who are watching it to get better. And I don't mean anything super negative to the actors themselves, actresses, though they don't know who I am and never will. They're irrelevant in their own Athenian cloud of, Mount Olympus. But the trainers themselves, like, I don't mean to get down on you guys. I'm sure you're swell people, but, I went to school for a long time, and I'm a professor of this stuff, and you're doing things that are not up for debate, very wrong. And so you can do better. And then it's all love, and it's all love either way. It's okay. Fuck them. Fuck these Hollywood idiots. Rip them off. Take their fucking money.
Well, we already had that whole chat about there's some critique that is worthwhile listening to. And I would say that's some critique that's worthwhile them listening to. So hopefully they do, like, if any of them do check out any of the videos, they can take it on board and actually start maybe improving their coaching.
Sure.
But yeah, thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Mike, again, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the mini cuts so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The mini cut movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.